This is the WHTC Morning News with Gary Stevens and Peg McNichol on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
Welcome back to the WHTC Morning News for this Tuesday, December 7th. Tuesday mornings, we have a chance to chat with one of the two men who represent the Lakeshore in the U.S. House. He is Congressman Fred Upton, joining us from his offices in Washington. Good morning, Fred. December 7th. I can't say that date without echoing FDR, a date which will live in infamy. Yeah, and of course, 1941 as well. We should not forget.
Well, we shouldn't. And my mom has the story, my mom's now 92, and this date has lived with us for a long time. Of course, my dad served in World War II. They're both still alive. I'm so lucky. But it was certainly the start of World War II. There's no question about it. And I saw already that President Biden stopped by the World War II Memorial earlier this morning to pay respects to all those that served in World War II.
And of course, not too many left that survived the situation in Honolulu that began the conflagration that lasted until 1945. Let's talk about some of the things going on in Washington as we speak. And I want to start, first of all, with a listener question he wanted me to pose to both you and to Bill Heisinger. Please ask them why they both joined a total of 80 Republicans and voted in favor of the federal vaccination database bill. This listener believes that this is another step towards the government tracking health and other information they are not entitled to know. How would you respond to that question and other similar questions from your constituents?
Well, he's got misinformation. This is a bill that passed by unanimous vote in the Energy and Commerce Committee, every Republican, every Democrat. It does not do that at all. There's no reporting. If anything, it strengthens the privacy laws protecting the individual's right, whether they get vaccine or not. There's no mandate in this, but there are some very erroneous publications that came out. Maybe they didn't read the bill, but the bill did pass, and it doesn't do anything that the caller said.
All right. A couple of other things going on in Washington. President Biden signed that short-term stopgap spending bill this past Friday to keep the government running through February 18th. However, Congress has a December 15th deadline to raise the federal debt ceiling. How much of a struggle is that going to be, Fred?
Well, it is going to be a struggle. I mean, traditionally, this is the party in power. In this case, obviously, the Democrats have they've got the responsibility to get this done, just as Republicans did when they were in charge. It is not a great vote. No one likes to do this. This one is not likely to be attached to any spending reforms or anything like that. Everyone knows it has to happen because otherwise there is a default. But there's not been a lot of communication to the Republican side. But traditionally, the Democrats have to provide the votes to do this. There is what we call a vehicle, a legislative process that they can do it and pass it. They don't necessarily want to do that, but I think that their hand is going to be forced, and they're going to be required to use one of the reconciliation bills that, in essence, is on the shelf that doesn't need the 60 vote. Meet the 60 vote threshold to avoid a filibuster to get done. So it'll happen, but there's a lot of grumbling about it, is usually the case, and then it comes up the next day.
It has been a week since the events of what happened in Oxford, just north of Detroit, occurred. It's easy to ask for reactions in the day or two immediately after. We're a week after that, and maybe a chance to put this into perspective. What's the sentiment around Congress about some who are saying something must be done today, to try to deal with this? Or is it just going to go by the wayside, as we've seen with Columbine and with some other similar incidents, Sandy Hook? Will Oxford just be another footnote in that regard?
I was on the education committee when Columbine came. And we had some of the survivors come testify before our committee. There wasn't a dry eye there. I met with some of the Parkland survivors as well and their families. And thank God we stopped a big case that would have put Paw Paw on the map, along with Parkland and Columbine and now Oxford as well. kids can't learn when they're in an unsafe environment. A lot of steps have been taken, not only in terms of visitation, parents and others coming into a school, outsiders, a lot of security devices. It's pretty impossible to stop everything that might occur, which is why we in Michigan have a system that frankly failed at Oxford, and that is a real tip line to the state police where they can inform the local authorities. In this case, it would have been Sheriff Mike Bouchard, someone that our entire congressional delegation knows. He's been a statewide candidate, a very respected member of the law enforcement community for sure. Done an outstanding job, I think, on the press conferences that I've seen. But somehow that system broke down. We know that there are parents and students who did not go to school that day because of the threats that they saw on social media, and yet no one pushed those forward to the tip line to law enforcement where they might have been able to take some steps to prevent it. So I think we have to look at that, but we also have to look at mental health needs. Let's face it. My sense is that this young man was pretty troubled and had been for some time based on what I know today. And we've got to take those steps to try and prevent that from happening in the future. But it's a tragic time. Virtually our whole delegation stood together in honor of the family member, the student's body that were killed. And but it's something that, you know, we've seen copycats now across the state as well. So it's something that certainly is on everybody's mind.
Peg McNichol has a question for you, Fred, from the newsroom. Go ahead, Peg.
We talked to Representative Luke Meerman, father of 5 with 2 kids in high school yesterday. And one thing that he talked about was the importance of, filing charges against parents and making them also responsible for gun misuse. Do you support the notion, as one of our callers suggested, of requiring gun owners to have some kind of liability insurance or increased penalties for people who don't properly store their weapons? What would you say would be some deterrents to the availability of the weapons for kids who are troubled?
Well, this is more of a state issue than a because there are state laws. Every state has a little difference in terms of what they do. But yeah, I happen to believe that parents ought to be responsible for their kids, particularly when they're minors, for the action that they may or may not take, particularly when they know that child, in this particular case, at least what we've seen, that the dad bought the gun in just a few days before. So, and gave it to his son as a present, even though he was 15 years old. So yeah, there's got to be some responsibility there. And I think that's why charges are going to be pending in this case against both the dad and the mom, but particularly if they had advanced knowledge of what was going on. And, again, more details are going to emerge. They met with school authorities, didn't pass that along to the law enforcement folks. A lot of steps, it seemed like, could have, Monday morning quarterback, they certainly should have stopped what happened on that particular day.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I decided to wait a week before asking the questions involving this particular incident with you. And then, of course, on Thursday, hopefully with Bill Heising to get some perspective on the entire situation. Fred Upton, as always, we appreciate the time. We're sort of backed up on some things here, but hopefully all goes well in Washington for you. Wish you and everyone well. And if all goes well, let's do this again next week, sir.
It'll happen.
Thank you very much, Fred Upton, on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.